Good afternoon. My name is David Demsey, and welcome to this very special Sittin' In, this very special Clark Terry 100th birthday Sittin' In. I have with me three great guests. First of all, a bassist who is on our faculty and played in Clark Terry's group for over 3 decades. And he is on this concert, this jazz room concert, Mr. Marcus McLaurine. Marcus, thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me, Dave.
We have also one of the world's great trumpeters, a gentleman who is on our trumpet faculty and who was more or less the musical director of this concert, plays so great and is so versatile, and also owes a lot to Mr. Clark Terry. Please greet Mr. Jeremy Pelt.
Thanks for having me. Thanks. I'm glad to be here.
And as our guest of honor today, we have the one and only, I think, a person who was really instrumental, no pun intended, in creating this Clark Terry archive that sits behind me, Clark's wife of many years, and someone who was deeply involved in many aspects of his life and career. Great Miss Gwen Terry. Gwen, thank you. That's wonderful.
Thank you, David. I love you all so much, and I'm so happy to be here.
Thank you. Well, I would like, first of all, to ask you, maybe Marcus, how did you meet Clark? You played with him, as I said, for 3 decades. How did that relationship start?
Yeah, that's a very interesting and a very involved story, long story. But I'll try to condense it for you. I won't.
About 15.
But what happened was when I first moved to New York, because initially I wasn't going to move to New York. I was going to go to California. I was in the military. I was in the 590th Air Force Band in New Jersey. And I'd met Clifford Adams, great trombonist. And he taught me into coming to New York. He said, New York needs bass players. So I said, okay, I'll come to New York till all my money runs out, and then I'll leave, But then I did a gig with Clifford up in uptown New York in a club called Lickety Split. We played the gig, and on the break, Clifford said that Melba Liston's here, and she wants to meet you. I said, really? I didn't know who Melba Liston was. Little did I know she was a great arranger, trombonist. But anyway, I went over to meet her, and she had some musicians with her, Erica Lindsay and Chessie Tanksley. And she says, I really enjoy your playing, Would you like to join my band? I said, yes. So I joined her band. And little did I know, we played Carnegie Hall with Dizzy Gillespie and did all kind of festivals. And I realized that she was a really heavyweight lady, Well, anyway, fast forwarding to the end of the year, this was around February, January. Go to December. I get this phone call. I'm at the house. And gentleman says, this is Clark Terry. Is this Marcus McLaurine? I said, oh, yeah, right. Yeah, this is Clark Terry. He said, no, this is Clark Terry. I have a week at the Blue Note, and I have a week up in Quebec City, Canada. Can you make it? I said, yes. And so that's how I get in. But what happened was Clark called Melba. She says, Melba, I need a bass player. Who can you recommend? And she says, call my bass player, Marcus McLaurine. And that's how I got the gig. So I'm totally indebted to Melba Liston. She got me that gig.
And what year was this, Marcus? 1980?
This was 1980. This was actually the week of Clark's birthday.
Wow.
We played a birthday. It was birthday week at the Blue Note. It was December 1981.
81. Okay.
I moved to New York in October 1980. And that gig was, the Blue Note gig was December. That was the week of his birthday, the 14th.
So what is how many years is that? My math is failing me. 30.
My math is failing me too. But it's
years?
It's over 30 years.
Okay. That's an amazing relationship we'll want to hear more about. Jeremy, as the youngest of all of us, I know you had a chance to perform with Clark. I know he's a big influence on you. Can you talk about that?
I will, but just since you pointed out that I'm the youngest, I'm going to further go ahead and say that you're working on 4 years, Marcus. Because that you said, if you said 1981, then that's you know.
That's when I joined the band. Was in '81. Yeah.
So that's 39 years ago. I'm sorry. Now now back to your question, David.
How did you meet Clark? And
I met Clark. I was in Boston at school at Berkeley, and the first time I met him, they had just introduced the Thelonious Monk jazz program to NEC, and so they would have guest musicians come in for a week, you know, a residency. And Clark came in, and they would have open. I wasn't in the Thelonious Monk program, but they would have open clinics for all the schools to come by. And so you know, of course, I went there, and that's where I met him. After that, I always made it a point to stay after, stick around, and ask him some questions. And you know, I got a chance to talk to him a little bit. I think he was in the middle of almost about to, he had to give a lesson to the trumpet player that actually was in the program. And so just before the trumpet player showed up, I, you know, picked his, you know, but for me, I was very meticulous about checking out different cats. So, you know, when I look back at, you know, young Jeremy, the questions were kind of, well, they're not stupid questions, but it was more, you know, I was in a very big Booker Little phase. And so you know, anybody that was Clark age, of course, including Clark, would have known Booker, right? And so instead of me being like, how was it like playing with Duke Ellington, or how was it like playing with, you know, Count Basie, or any of the other 100 million, you know, monumental things that he did, I'm like, can you tell me about Booker? You know, and you know, Clark, you know, he was happy to oblige as much as he knew in that little amount of time. And then every once in a while, I'd see him perform after that, until I moved to New York and, you know, got my bearings, and then you know, was able to, you know, have a couple small conversations. I'd see him at the Vanguard. There were a couple times I played with him on stage, you know, and he would always be like, the golden years suck, you know, and so that was pretty much the story.
yeah, you said that he would always have a line about you, where he would ask what horn you were playing.
Yeah. I mean, you know, I was playing with Lewis Nash's band and his quintet, and Clark was brought in as a special guest to do the special mumbles. And you know, a lot of people are starting to get hip to the fact that Nash could actually sing and do some mumbles too. And so they did a little bit together. And before he was coming out on stage, you know, he saw me with my horn, and I was playing a Constellation. He said, "What kind of horn is that?" And I said, "This is a con." "Oh, you're a con man, huh?" Yeah.
Always. Gwen, how did you meet Clark? I mean,
I was living in Dallas, Texas. It was 1990. It was January. I was working in my office that I had started, which was called STAR, Students Targeting Adult Responsibility. I was helping college enrollment from our high schools. And this lady, both of us knew, Clark knew her and I knew her, had told Clark about me. And he said later, many people try to hook me up with women. He said, yeah. So she sent him a package on me with different publicity and stuff I was doing. And she sent me a package on him, because I didn't know anything about jazz, pretty much. I didn't know anything about him, you know, or anything. So eventually, long story short, he called me in a 3-way call on the telephone with the lady. And he said he'd call me right back. So he did. And what I noticed initially was he had the most wonderful sense of humor. He was down to earth. He was very accommodating. He asked questions I'd never been asked before, like, how long is the hair on your arms? You know, or, is that your real hair? You know, he was just humorous. And I could tell he was very, very intelligent. He was never boring. And I think both of us, according to what he said, I knew from that conversation that I was going to marry you. And that was even before we met each other.
Wow.
So basically, he just swooned me and wooed me. And I guess I did the same to him, but we were a perfect match for each other, and we enjoyed traveling. I love to cook. I love students, and he loves students. And that's the part that really got me. And he flew me to Chicago to see him for the first time. We talked on the phone every day from wherever he was, and eventually he flew me to Chicago, and I was all dressed up, and I had really long hair and had it swooped to the side, and I was trying to look cute. And then here he comes with his leather hat, and he had it cocked acey-doocy. He had on his head and his leather and all of this black shine fabric and stuff, and he was he was handsome. So we kissed so much, long story short, in the car going to the hotel. I already told him, I said, my mama told me not to do anything, with anybody on the first date, using Southern lingo. And he said, don't worry, my mother told me the same thing. So we kissed each other so much his mustache turned pink, and we loved each other from day one on the phone. That's my short version.
Wow.
And how long were you married?
We were married for 23 years. We actually got married on February 14th, 1992. And we were together for 25 years. Yeah. And I adored him and all of his students. And I cooked for everybody. And they stayed in the house with us, whatever house we were in. And I just loved being with Clark. I could never, ever, ever forget him. And I'm so happy that you have the archive there, David. It's just fabulous. The students are fabulous. I'm glad, Jeremy, that you're there with us at William Paterson.
Thank you.
You're adorable, and I've heard all about different things, that you've been doing, and I love you already. Marcus, I love you. You were there with us all the way, and I love your family, and they grew up around Clark and me, so I'm just very honored to be here.
Well, I remember meeting you. I remember the first time I met you. Do you remember
Yeah.
that? Remember that? You don't remember, do you?
I don't know.
I remember. I guess there's some great matter still left, a little bit left still. It was in St. Louis, the gig we did in St. Louis. This is where we first met you. As Don Friedman was on that gig, and Peyton Crosley actually was playing drums, and myself. And we met you for the first time. It was in St. Louis. This is a gig we did in St. Louis.
Okay, well,
Hometown.
Yeah,
hometown.
Homegrown, yeah.
It is true. It's an amazing thing. He goes all the way back to the riverboats, for heaven's sake. He spans the entire history of the music. When he was a kid, hanging out on the riverboats. I mean, it's incomprehensible to think about one man whose life really spans the entire music.
Yeah.
The way he's connected to Armstrong. He told stories about he and Dizzy going over and sitting on Louis Armstrong's front steps, waiting for him to come out of the house. His relationship with Armstrong was the same as our students' relationship with him, And Gwen, you bring up the whole connection to students. I mean, just always connected with Clark. I think the students were as important to him as playing.
Yes, they were.
Teaching.
Yeah.
Can you talk about some of that, Gwen?
Well, I know that he was very approachable, Jeremy. You saw that when you first met him, and Marcus, he cared, and he sincerely was a genuine person. He meant everything, and his students, he believed. When he was with the Tonight Show, he started turning down gigs. He was the first Black man on staff as a musician at NBC, and he was with the Tonight Show for 12 years. And so he was on what is called First Call, where you have first call on all the good gigs, commercials, and all of that. He's way back then, he could see he wasn't going to have enough time to do what he really wanted to do if he kept playing and do it. He wanted to teach more than anything. So he told them to take his name off First Call. He started turning down money because he had made a lot of money. He traveled, he had clothes and diamonds and all of that. And he could see that was material, and that's not really what mattered. And what mattered was were his students. So he started teaching them, and he saw he could have captive audiences at the schools. students were there one-on-one with him, and he could just figure out how to reach each of them, bring them out, encourage them, get the jitters and the nervousness that they may experience, make it fun. He did things like the bun hop, and he would actually hop around, you know. So his students meant the world to him. And I think everybody who met him pretty much would agree.
Yeah.
I owe Clark a world of debt because I wasn't really going to go into teaching. You know, that's something that I learned from Clark. You know, because I had been in his band for a while, but he was doing these jazz camps that I was not a part of. Major Holly at that time was still living, and he was his first call for teaching at his camps. So when Major passed, he asked me would I like to come down and be a part of the jazz camp that he was doing. I think it was in Oklahoma. I think that was down in Oklahoma at the college down there. And so being around Clark all those years, I saw how he approached teaching and how closely he was involved with his students. He made it very personal, you know. And I didn't think that I was really going to be a teacher. He's one that really showed me how to teach. Watching him was how I learned.
Yeah, I first was exposed to Clark as a student as well, in bands, you know, when he came through and played in schools, and then later as a young professional, played big band gigs, you know, when he would come through as a single and they would assemble a band to play with him. So, and one of my mentors, Jeremy, I haven't mentioned this trumpet name to you, but a gentleman named Don Stratton, who was in New York in the 60s, played with Mingus, played little with Charlie Parker. He was also in the administration, actually. He was the registrar at Manhattan School of Music, and he was responsible for getting Max Roach and Yusef Lateef there as students, etc. So Clark mentored Don. He's in the book, actually. Thank you, Clark. Some of those early teaching efforts with Billy Taylor. And so Clark was one of the first jazz musicians I ever knew. Even before I knew who John Coltrane was, I knew who Clark Terry was, you know. So even though I think Clark, when Gwen, you and Clark came to William Paterson and made that announcement that you were going to give us this archive, little did you know that you already had a devotee and fan here.
I didn't know.
But little did I know that it was going to go like that, you know. I didn't know. I remember standing in the back of the room. It was in our recital hall, room 101, the Clark, you know, the master of timing. We didn't know anything about this. And he just dropped it on everybody and said, I have a little announcement to make, you know. And we all thought, Marcus, you were there as well, because you were on our faculty.
Right.
Yeah, and we thought, oh, we got a new album, Clark, you're touring something. And he said, we want our archive to be here, my archive. And I remember sitting in the back of the room, I leaned to a colleague next to me and said, I think our lives just changed. How true.
Absolutely.
Was and continues to. And I think it's not an understatement to say that Clark is as involved here now in our rehearsals, in the curriculum, as he was when he was with us on the planet. The only time, of course, when he was in the building, then, you know, all previous events are canceled and we would all just follow Clark around. It was his program when he was with us. But I think he's, you know, still so involved in everything. Marcus, you're doing an all Clark Terry ensemble right now, are you not?
Get ready. Our first tune was One Foot in the Gutter. So the next project is going to be Buck's Business. That's what we'll be working on in a couple of days.
And do you want to talk about that ensemble a little bit? Because it's a slightly unusual ensemble.
Yeah, it's actually it's a very unique situation, you know, and I'm, you know, kind of learning as I go, you know, but we have two students from Korea. We have a vocalist, Sha-Young Kim, Sung-Kyung Kim on piano, Sha-Young on vocals. And we have a young bass player from St. Louis. I think Sam is a freshman. He's really good bass player, though. Really talented bass player.
Yeah.
And we have Jackie Jing, tenor from San Francisco, and we have Jack. I can't think of Jack's last name, but Jack is on guitar, and I
Oh,
think
Santoro.
Santoro, and Marlon on drums, female drummer,
Yeah.
excellent drummer. Uh, so 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 far it's been very interesting. They've been like doing their tracks individually, sending them to me, and I've been trying to like mix them in Pro Tools. Trying to get my editing chops together. So it's a good experience for me learning wise on that tip. But yeah, it's been a very interesting experience. Very talented young people.
In other words, for the people who are watching this, and this little session may have legs beyond this time, we are now in the middle of this pandemic situation. And yeah, Marcus's ensemble is all online. It's literally a worldwide ensemble. You got people in 4 different time zones.
Yeah. So I'm going to send you some tracks actually later on today. We've been working on this one track. They can't take that away from me. So I'll let
Great.
you get a chance to check that out. But it's been a unique.
Yeah, the Intercontinental Clark Terry Ensemble. You know, it's
Yeah.
kind of somehow poetic. A man
That,
spanned the world. This ensemble spans the world.
truth be told, any ensemble that I teach, and I taught the Clark Terry Ensemble, I think my second semester there. And but truthfully, any ensemble that I teach, especially when I have a trumpet player in the ensemble, it becomes at some point a Clark Terry ensemble, because I'm always telling them about phrasing, and when I get into that bag, that's all I talk about is Clark Terry and Dizzy Gillespie, and I'm like, listen, man, you need to check out check out how he's doing, So I'm always singing that gospel anyhow.
Jeremy, can you talk a little bit about, I've never asked you about this, about your take on doodle tonguing and Clark's whole thing?
I don't know if that I have a take on it. I think here's the thing. My take is I can't do it. But here's what's interesting. I remember when Clark released his autobiography, and I was first in line to pick it up, read it in no time, quicker than I've read any book. And one of the things that stood out to me about Clark was, what he said in his autobiography was that he was self-taught. And he made his first trumpet that he made out of some rubble out of a garbage, a trash yard or something like that, right? And so you figure that and then when you see him, and I've seen all types of footage of Clark from the late 40s and the 50s and whatnot, and how poised he is as a trumpet. It's almost like you're looking at Maurice Andre, that kind of skill, playing the trumpet is amazing. And he really is in a very low percentage of trumpet players that have created their own, not only their own language, but their own way of playing the trumpet, which is that's even more amazing, because we could talk about all the Miles Davis and all the great, wonderful soloists in this music. Certainly Clark is not the only one, but he is the only one that really cultivated his own tonguing, which is unheard of. And look, Miles got a great deal from Clark,
Yeah.
and so when you think about like the doodle tonguing and the doodle deedle diddle and all that, I never really had the patience to delve into it, tonguing together. But every time I listen to it, I'm like, wow, how's he doing this? I'm listening, I listen very closely, because, and I mean, like, there's only 2 trumpet players that I can think of that really had their own unique way of phrasing and tonguing. That's Clark and that's Diz. And so, I'm well aware of it, very well aware of it. To the extent that I could do it, absolutely, that's a non-starter. But it's nothing short of amazing, especially again when you figure out the fact that he was self-taught. I mean, and and one of the things that I tell my students is that, just in terms from a technical aspect, I mean, I've seen this man. So there are actual technical exercises for the trumpet called the Clark studies. It wasn't named after Clark Terry, but they are called the Clark studies. And I remember seeing him many occasions. And this is when he was was half blind at that point. Was he legally blind, or was he? I know that he at that point he really couldn't see well, and he would be helped in the backstage and something like that. He would still be warming up, and trumpet.
Uh-oh.
He's in.
It's freezing up a little bit. There we go.
Did you? Okay. And after seeing him do the Clark exercises, just buzzing with no trumpet, my whole thing about teaching was like, listen, this man is 80 at that point. He was 80 something odd years old, can't see, still just basically buzzing. And I said, yeah, that's a lifetime thing that you got to be doing and being on point and being able to do that. And here's the proof right here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you mentioned Clark's autobiography, which I think Gwen was a huge force in getting that done, getting it to happen. It's really one of the great jazz autobiographies, because it's not only does it tell the facts, not just a lot of sort of amusing stories, but it really tells the facts, but it sounds like Clark. It's so funny. I remember I gave a copy of the book to Mulgrew Miller when it first came out, and Mulgrew took it to Europe, and he got back, and I said, "How did you like the book?" And he said, "Well, the first night I started to read it after the gig in my hotel room," and he said, "They called my room and told me that I had to hold the party down. They were getting ready to throw me out." And he's in the hotel room with that book. And it was so funny, they almost threw me out of the hotel. So it's most definitely, you have to read that book.
It was a great book. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
And it's Clark, what's the full title, Gwen? The Life of Clark Terry.
Autobiography of Clark Terry.
University of California Press.
Yes.
And it's everywhere. It's in paperback now. The paperback edition is basically exactly the same as the hardcover. So go get it. Your homework, viewers. Gwen, can you talk about Clark having all those students in the house? What was that like?
Well, he was teaching lessons. He would sit in a white chair we had in our den, and they would sit around him on the floor like a horseshoe shape. And he would give lessons until he would fall asleep in front of them. And they would still sit there watching him in case he woke up and said anything else. But the students had also a full big band rehearsal in our basement in Haworth, New Jersey. And somebody called the police because I told Clark it was too late. It was a Sunday night. He said he didn't care. And so there was a big band rehearsal in our house. We had a big band playing in the house in Pine Bluff. I think, Marcus, you were there in our living room. So he had students all the time staying with us, traveling with him. I helped to teach them how to cook and do things on the road that I learned. And I encouraged them also. And as far as doodle tonguing, I didn't realize when I was with Clark David that I was witnessing his teaching so often until it was just like everyday things to me. He taught me how to circular breathe. He could reverse circular breathe. I wish I had filmed that. He did the doodle tonguing and the lull and the doodle doodle and all of that. the tonguing, he would practice on the plane with just his mouthpiece or his mute in his horn. And I remember one of the students looked at his calendar and he had practice, you know, so many times whenever he would have a break. And they said, "You mean Clark Terry practices?" I said, "Every day. He's buzzing or he's doing something." So he took opportunity to teach even when we were, I think, at Lincoln Center. And they said, "Ladies and gentlemen, Clark Terry," and nobody could find him. He was down in the basement. We finally figured out where the sound was coming from, giving Wallace Rooney a trumpet lesson. And Clark was supposed to be on stage. So that just tells you his dedication and commitment. But students were as much a part of our life as sunshine and rain. It was always, you know, somebody was always there. And I loved the students as much as Clark because I was working with students when I met him. He had to step over students in my den who were sleeping on the floor the first time he came over because my son's frat brothers were there. And I always knew that whatever person I was really chosen to be with, which I felt it was Clark for sure, you know, would have to allow me young people. And he loved them as much as I did. So the book, what a real project that was. I would ask him questions and I quickly recognized that I wasn't really qualified to ask him questions because he would say, "I remember what I had for breakfast this morning." I mean, he just, you know, would kind of fluff it off. But the research to do that book that I had to go through, and people were coming from everywhere. I remember Ian Carr visited us. I think he was from Europe. And he was working on something, I think, from Miles. I'm not sure. Yeah. And he said, "Gwen, don't quit." And then Tad Hershen took me over to Rutgers, and all this research is there, you know, and I did that. And David, you were always encouraging because it was very challenging. But your students everywhere, I can't even remember how many universities he taught at, you know, all over the world. Even in Cascais, Portugal, and all kinds of places I'd never even heard of. So he loved all of you just from the bottom of his heart, his soul, with everything that was in him. And I just loved him for doing that, for being like that, because that was just from heaven for me. So David, you know, William Paterson was a very special place in his heart. And he chose your school. Your students were serious. You were serious. You played in his big band. You were very qualified. I remember the president singing mumbles at the dining room table, you know. So everybody, it was a marriage of love everywhere we went. Everywhere. We stayed in houses of friends. We went to dinners up on mountains in Greece or wherever he was always looking for something to share with somebody as far as trumpet playing and music. Always.
Yeah, that.
Just not real quick. I actually wanted to share a quick story with you to cut in here real quick because when you know the gig that I did with Clark was not the first time that I ever saw Clark though, which is interesting because it's funny how fate works. You know, like to me in life there's no mistakes in this life. Everything happens the way that it's supposed to happen. So we go back many years later. I'm working with this gentleman, and I'm from Omaha, Nebraska. So I'm living in Omaha, Nebraska. I'm about maybe 19 years old, and I'm working with this gentleman, Preston Love. He's an alto player. He used to play with the Demsey band many years ago, back in the 40s. He used to be a Motown band leader. He had moved back to Omaha, so I started working with his band. So he got a job up at the University of Nebraska. So we go up to the University of Nebraska and go into the student center. And the student center is like packed, and there's a band playing. Gentleman on trumpet with the rhythm section. Turns out it was Clark playing flugelhorn. I can't remember the piano, but Victor Lewis was playing drums. Victor was a student at the University of Nebraska.
Wow.
And I remember hearing Clark do mumbles. I had never heard mumbles before. I really wasn't really that much into jazz, much. But I heard Clark do mumbles, and I was laughing so hard, my face was hurting. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Because he said this is this foreign language, but it's making sense, but it's not making sense at the same time, And Victor Lewis reminds me to this day, he always reminds me what year that was. That was like 1972 when that happened. Yeah. So our paths were destined. And I didn't meet Clark that day, ironically. We didn't meet. I met Victor though, but I didn't meet Clark.
No.
And so it's funny how people's paths are destined to intertwine, you know.
Oh, I've learned that times 100 in this archive.
Mm.
You know, there's stuff that's happened here that is so far beyond the realm of coincidence that I've just learned to just stay open and keep moving forward. Jeremy, can you talk about this great concert? Speaking of mumbles, the Clark Terry want to present to you today the Clark Terry Profiles and Courage Award. Oh, that. And I should, for our audience, even though this is going to be viewed just before the concert, we've already recorded the concert a couple of days ago. So we know what you're about to experience. Yeah, please elucidate.
Well, you know, first of all, again, thanks for asking me to put this together. I could only laugh because at some point, I don't know what kind of divine source came down and told me that I should go ahead and do mumbles, but I said, you know, hey, look. Clark would have wanted me to have fun with it. You know what I mean? There's no way that I'm going to sound like Clark. There's no way that anybody's going to sound like Clark. So the best thing I could do is just have fun and try to bring that same kind of, fun vibe and comedic nature to it. So that kind of opens the bag that, you know, the cat's out of the bag. Yeah, mumbles is part of the performance. But, you know, I also had a good time just choosing the material for the performance. And this was material that I've grown up listening to, and also material that I'd seen him do in concert. And so therefore, I just feel like when you guys hear the concert, you guys are going to have a good time. Everybody played great, and I'm just excited for you guys to hear it. You know, even mumbles.
That was some A-team mumbling right there. That.
Well, you know, the funny thing is, I was sitting next to my daughter. She just turned 4, and she loves mumbles. She really does. From the Clark Terry and Oscar Peterson, and that's one of the things that she loves the most. And so I think on the days leading, and she's been loving that for like okay, she's only 4. She's been loving it for like 2-3 years now. But then I was the days leading up to it, where I was actually deciding, am I really going to do this? I started looking at all these YouTube videos of doing mumbles, and she would come sit next to me, and she'd be like, "Daddy, you know, are you?" Because I'll be actually practicing too, and she's looking at me like, "Why are you doing this?" You know, well. It's my own personal tribute, but anyhow, I think that you guys will dig the concert.
Well, yeah, that whole secret language that Clark had, it speaks to young kids. When Laura, who thank heavens really got to know Clark eventually, when she was little, you know, I'd come at her and say, "Laura, it's time to swag, you know, and she'd say, what? After a while, she got to know the language. She mumbled back at me. You know, yeah, it's magic. Clark was magic.
Yeah, he was.
You know,
you did a commendable job, Jeremy.
Well, thank you. Thanks for the encouragement.
Gwen, do you have anything you want to ask? I'm making you co-host of this discussion. Do you have anything you?
Oh, well, I'm just enjoying listening to all the stories. I think we all still love Clark so much and we miss him, and his presence is still with us, and I'm looking forward to seeing the concert and all of the different tributes that you all have planned. And I'm just happy to be here and listen. I think Clark was he was what is called eternally unforgettable to me. As far as jazz history, he was a walking anthology of firsthand information about jazz. He met so many people. I remember we walked in the room at one of the buildings at the Capitol in DC, and all of the students in the room immediately came to Clark. So that magnetic personality, he could engage a 3-year-old or a 73-year-old or a 90-year-old. And he was just never ending with knowledge. And he always believed that there were at least 10,000 things to do on your instrument. And he wanted to learn all 10,000, create them yourself, go find them for yourself, but let that be a priority and a commitment. He was a dedicated and seriously honest to the craft person. It was just never boring. I could never stop learning from him, and the
Mhm.
little experience I'd had in show business and talent management and real estate, I was so happy to incorporate all of that into Clark's life and to just make sure that the students always had good food to eat, because I'm a soul sister who loves to cook soul things, gumbo, anything you want. And the restaurants that he would take me to, he loved good food. And he was what I call a chef director. He didn't cook, but he could tell you what to do. And I think a couple of his recipes are in Jazz Cooks in that book. But I would learn how to cook whatever he liked. I would just taste the ingredients and I would study it and I'd go home and I'd fix it for him, and it was just fun and games, all the time. So I'm just looking at all that history behind you on the wall and the archive. And this is only one room. You have students whose lives are changed and people whose lives are changed. He changed my life. And he told me that he said, I love you. He used to make teddy bears out of towels on the cruises that we would go to. They take the towels and fold up and put them on
Mhm.
your bed in the shapes of animals. So he was just creative beyond any limit. He was a painter. He liked jewelry. He liked to, just do anything, look at the sunsets. And he loved to look at the water. He loved ships and boats, and everything he played, he incorporated all of that into whatever he was playing. He was playing love stories. He said he was I think it was the Vanguard, and there was a student on stage really trying to impress Prez. And after the gig was over, Clark was standing around with the guys, and he said, the kid walked up and said, because the kid was playing a lot of fast notes and all that, and the kid said, how did you like my playing, Prez? And he said, well, I heard you play, but what is your story? So Clark was playing stories, and he didn't want his students to just play a whole lot of notes. He wanted them to tell a story from inside of them, in their souls, while he was playing on the horn. He could talk through his trumpet. You could actually understand words that he was saying to you, including the little expletive languages and whatever. He could do all of that. And I remember playing Stardust. We were at a doctor's office in Little Rock at a hospital. And she was asking about Clark, and I looked up Stardust on YouTube. It's a black and white video. And it's just like perfection, always perfection every time he would play. And she just started crying. She said, I can't believe that. He was playing about the real stars and the love. I mean, he had so much to draw from. So I could go on and on and on, as you can see, about Clark, because he was totally fascinating, from the F to the G of the word, fascinating,
Mhm.
every single day in every way. And I'm just so happy that you all are carrying on students, dreams, and helping them to make their dreams come true. And the only thing he ever asked was that the students do the same thing for students in the future. And I loved
Mm.
that. Yeah.
Right on.
Well, this concert is, of course, 100th birthday tribute to Clark. It'll air November 8th, but it'll also air on the 14th of December, which is Mr. Terry's actual 100th birthday date. And it'll be full between those two dates online available as a streaming. But, the important thing to know is that that is one day here at William Paterson that we could not ask for a better trumpet teacher to further this heritage and this legacy than Mr. Pelt. And we could not ask for a better bass faculty than somebody who's not only is the musician he is, but also soaked in that Clark Terry-ness for almost 40 years. So Marcus McLaurine, thank you, both on the concert. And Gwen, this is for Clark, but it's for you too.
Oh, thank you, David.
As I said, it's one day here at William Paterson, but Clark is a part of this curriculum and a part of the ensembles, but I think even more deeply, he's a part of the vibe of the program. Always will be.
Yeah.
So you can be assured of that. Thank you to all of you. This will be a great concert, and you can go get the book. You can go watch the documentary film Keep On Keeping On, which is produced by one of our alumni, great drummer here, who claims now he can't find his drumsticks because he's so busy. Filmmaker Alan Hicks just did also a big documentary on Quincy Jones, and it co-stars, if you will, Justin Coughlin, young pianist who was a student here, who was when Clark arrived, and Justin is blind, and so they had a very unique relationship. So you can get that, but most of all, go enjoy this concert. Jeremy just is so beautiful, not only on the trumpet, but also, Clark's. I remember we finished the concert, lights go up, and I turned around to Marcus, and Marcus, you said to me, Clark was here today.
Yeah.
It's here. That just nailed the whole day for me. It just did. It felt like Clark was there with us. He would have been thrilled with it. And I'm glad that we were all a part of it. So thanks to all of you. And for those of you moving on to the concert, that you have to do after you've heard this concert. This, by the way, will also be followed by a slideshow that was Gwen's brainchild. It's called Clark Terry 100 Faces, 100 William Paterson individuals whose lives were touched and moved forward and raised by Clark Terry. And these two gentlemen with me are in that slideshow, as are a number of our students. So I hope you enjoy the whole day. Thanks so much.